Okay.
Are you ready to go?
Yeah.
Okay. Let us start with that. Good gracious God, we just thank you that we're able to gather here tonight and to study and reflect on the can we drink this cup. So we just ask that you give us eyes to see and ears to hear, and that tonight that we can realize there is light in the darkness, and that there is new life in the suffering, and there is joy beyond sorrow. In your name we pray. Amen. Amen. So tonight we're starting, can you drink this cup? And just as a way of introduction, Henri Nouwen begins this deeply personal book with a story of his vocation to the priesthood and his ordination in 1957, at which time his uncle, a priest, gave Henri the gold chalice that he had used for many years. In his later years, while living and working in the L'Arc Daybreak Company, Henri reflects on Jesus' question to James and John, "Can you drink the cup that I am going to drink?" The cup becomes a metaphor for life, and the question for all of us becomes, can we hold the cup of life in our hands? Can we lift it up for others to see? And can we drink it to the full? That's kind of what he says in the introduction. What is your reaction? Instead of the gold chalice he received from his uncle, Henri now uses a glass cup when celebrating the Eucharist. What symbolic difference do you see between the chalice and the cup?
It's more of the common people. The chalice would be traditional and probably expensive, where the glass would be ordinary.
Glass would certainly be replaceable and much more easy than the chalice itself.
And am I right in thinking when he was ordained in the Catholic Church, I think only the priest
I think so.
drank out of the cup?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know,
Yeah.
he was the only one that took the
Because I think
right.
that changed in 1962, so he would
But
have
I
been
think
ordained
when he
before
was
that.
ordained. So, and as our communion, particularly now with COVID, has changed.
Mhm.
And so, does it matter what the cup is?
No, I mean, it doesn't in our way of thinking. And it could be a Dixie cup as far as I know.
And as Carolyn said, he, you know, when he went to work at L'Arc and changed, he was more with the common people, and that's what he.
Mhm. Is that why he went away from the chalice? Because it seemed like he almost built up almost a dislike for that chalice. That it kind of started to sit in the cupboard, right? Or
Well,
on
to me,
display.
it was, and he said he's never passed it on
Right.
because there's not been another priest in their family. But he just, I think it's page 16 and 17. He talks about his deep emotion and getting the chalice. And or on page 21, I guess.
Is this why on 17, why you wanted us to part with our cup at the end? Because he asked his uncle, "You've used this forever. How can you give it up?"
Mhm.
How can you give it away? Because it was very special, because it was passed down to him. On page he said that on page 21, the precious golden chalice that could only be touched and used by an ordained priest is replaced by large glass cups in which the wine can be seen and from which many can drink. So then what was his relationship with his grandmother?
I like that. But I thought it was a little, I don't know, presumptuous almost of grandma, but she made investments and she made him
She
Oh,
made
a little altar.
and
Her playing, I already forgot.
Yeah.
And, and he would go down and play, and she encouraged him. He played mass and he was playing priest. Did any of you play church growing up?
We played house in school. I don't remember playing church.
I mean, when coming home from worship and stuff as a kid, I remember, kind of redoing it all in my head, and I would kind of rewrite the sermons in my head. I really, in my head, I think, play church, but not really with my brothers. Although I remember a seminary professor who said that he played church and they baptized cats and calves and all kinds. They said that's why there's more Lutherans in Wisconsin than there are people.
So do you think that was a calling from way back?
I think so.
But
Yeah.
I didn't play church. I mean, none of us did, huh?
But he also said about his grandmother that she helped him with his life of prayer and his personal relationship with Jesus.
Yeah.
So it seems to me like that was very authentic of his grandmother to kind of
And by
do
12,
these things. It's not like she sewed vestments for him and everything as a kid. He didn't have a chance.
No, he didn't have a chance not to do that. So do any of you have a mentor like he had a grandma? That could be your faith mentor?
It wouldn't have been a relative, but Sunday school teachers and especially Luther League, the adults that helped with Luther League were very influential in my faith.
The same with me.
Mm-hmm.
Was the church group, youth group at home at church was probably. Because, I mean, I guess we didn't, my grandma and our folks took us to church, but we never, I guess, and so.
If I were to rethink the sermon, I would have thought that was presumptuous of me. So I find that fascinating that you would do it. Whatever the pastor said, I took that as gospel truth. They were just fresh from the seminary, was not to believe. But for you, it was different. Yeah.
Yeah, and I never gave that any conscious thought.
It just was
something
there.
I did.
Yeah.
Probably as an introverted kid. And Sunday afternoons, it was kind of my parents' time to take a nap, maybe before chores in the evening. So I'd be outside and just goofing around by myself. So last time,
Probably the first time God nudged you.
Yeah.
I think Ripke was a guy that taught our high school Sunday school class, and we didn't have very many of this kind. But he was just always so faithful, and always encouraged us to read the Word, whether it seemed to have meaning or not. He wouldn't put up with us, and really had no reason to, except he loved Jesus, I think, and cared about us. So.
After we moved here, it was Betty Branstead from.
Yes.
She was.
She comes to my mind a lot in
Often,
discussions, but I stopped quoting her because people don't know who Betty Branstead was anymore. So,
So
very influential.
Yeah, so do you mean from afar as from a teacher or personal one-on-one?
Well, she would lead Bible studies and things here at church, and that's, I never had her as a teacher at school, but she was always, and prayer was her thing. And so I learned a lot about prayer from her. So, have any of you ever thought about the question, can you drink this cup?
not in the way the book, I thought, wow, I've never thought about it in this regard.
I guess I
didn't.
have never either. I mean, today, fill my cup, Lord, there's lots of references to cups. And, to fill, and he asked, what's in your cup? It's like, what's on your plate? And, but I had never, on page 23 and 24, in the middle, the second paragraph, can you drink the cup? Can you empty its dregs? Can you taste all the sorrows and the joys? Can you live your life to the full, whatever it will bring? And why should we drink this cup? There is so much pain, so much anguish, so much violence. Why should we drink the cup? Wouldn't it be a lot easier to live normal lives with minimal pain and maximum pleasure?
Can I see the front of your book? Because when you are going to certain pages, I don't have those
You don't
pages.
have,
at all.
this is on the question.
Can I
and
see the front?
introduction.
Can I see the front of your book without the paper in front of it?
Oh, see, mine's like Kathy, and that page don't correspond.
Yeah, the
either.
pages don't correspond.
You have a sticky note on.
Mine is different.
Yeah, that's why I can't see the.
Oh, this is,
Oh yeah, okay, mine doesn't look like that at all.
this is on the introduction.
Okay, yeah, the couple of times you've quoted a page, I'm like, yeah, no,
This is on
I'm
the
not there.
introduction.
Is that where he goes into the big,
Okay,
kind of a long laundry list of all the suffering in the world? Like,
No, that's
later, okay.
That's a little bit later.
Okay.
Yeah.
so
So
my introduction is 3 pages long.
So what is the difference between drinking the cup and following Christ?
I don't think there's anything different
So then
about
what
it.
are we saying? That we can't drink the cup, we can't follow him? Is that what you're saying? What are the choices?
To the full, I mean, we can turn away from suffering, right? I mean, we can turn away from our neighbor who's in
Or
need,
somebody else's suffering?
or a spouse even, or a child. I mean, we can turn away from that if we choose. So, I think every day we have to choose to bear the burdens of whatever the world sends our way and the burdens of others. So I think, yes,
and I think we'll talk more about that when we get to
Yeah.
drinking
Okay.
later on in.
Yeah, because I feel like the book is, like, I'm thinking, oh, I don't think I should be drinking any cups.
yeah.
Because I'm not good enough or perfect enough according to this book. And I always thought taking communion was a way to absolve and to come to the table and to get right with Jesus. And
So
I'm
you're
like,
associating drinking the cup with taking communion?
I am.
Oh.
Okay.
So you're not.
No,
No,
to me it's
no.
following Christ, but
That's not.
am I willing to take the cup and be crucified? Am I willing to drink the same cup that Jesus drank?
Sure.
And follow?
Die to self.
Okay. No, I was doing the communion thing.
Okay.
Okay. Now that gives a different perspective. Because he's talking about chalice and this and that. And I'm thinking, well, okay, it's communion wine then.
Okay, and this
Okay.
is chapter 1, holding, page 28. So when I make the quote, by means of the metaphor of holding a cup of wine, Henri examines the importance of looking at one's life, of reflecting upon all that it contains, both the sorrow and the joy. And he states, just living life is not enough. We must know what we are living. And that is on the second page of chapter 1. And there he
Page
says,
27 on ours.
the paragraph that starts, one thing I learned from it all. Well, of course, he talks about his uncle who was a connoisseur of wine, and it had to always be perfect, and the whole ritual of drinking the wine, and father always drank first, and and then he says, one thing I learned from it all, drinking wine is more than just drinking. You have to know what you are drinking, and you have to be able to talk about it. Similarly, just living life is not enough. We must know what we are living. A life that is not reflected upon isn't worth living. It belongs to the essence of being human that we contemplate our life, think about it, discuss it, evaluate, and form opinions about it. Half of living is reflecting on what's being lived. Is it worth it? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it old? Is it new? What's it all about? The greatest joy as well as the greatest pain of living came not only from what we live, but even more from how we think and feel about what we are living.
Now, Henri Nouwen died when he was 65, I believe. So at my age, I've already done all this searching and everything, so I don't have to do it anymore. So.
So since 65, you've not lived?
Yeah, but that's only, he was still searching back then. It's like,
So you've done all the contemplation and
yes,
searching.
I've done it
you've
all.
already
It's-
done all
yeah,
that.
It's
she's
so
done all that.
hard to dig into all that stuff.
Okay. So you've already done it.
Yeah.
I don't know, have the rest of you done it, reflected on your life? And
Barb has, because she wrote a book, so she
Yeah,
had
yeah,
to.
there you go.
yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know, I did, because that was most of my growing up years, but just now I had an opportunity to speak about it.
Mhm.
One coming up and one I just did. And so it makes me, you know, kind of relive that. And it seems like, yeah, I just dwell on it, you know, just kind of hold it, kind of like hold it in a
It's
cup.
kind of holding,
It's kind of like
because that's your
holding it, yeah.
life. This is
Uh-huh.
your life.
Certainly parts of my life I have certainly
Yeah.
contemplated a lot and just wondered about and.
I think we learn from that.
From
But it's
the,
such hard work.
it is from the
So
reflection.
Carolyn, are you just gonna cruise the rest of your life?
I think so, yeah.
She's going on a cruise and never got on a boat.
One of my devotional books, A.J. Russell, what is it? God Calling? He says over and over, it says, love and laugh, you know, because we have a lot to be joyful about.
Right.
But maybe you
Right.
like that book better. Love and laugh, Carolyn.
Thank you so.
I just told the confirmation students, we had a little question and answer time. I said one of the worst things we do to kids, I think, is tell them that when they reach 18 or 21, that they're going to be adults, and that, you know, that kind of like give them the idea that they've made it. But I said, every stage of life, we go through developmental stages. I said, you know, and I said, even until the last one, I didn't say this to them, but, and the last one is death, right? How do we die? So I mean, I don't know that you can cruise, can you? I think,
I said I
I'm
want
sorry.
to.
Yeah, okay, well,
I didn't say I could. I want.
maybe you can. If you discover how to do it, let me know, because I wouldn't mind it either.
Okay.
So, and then later on, this is on kind of the next page for me. He talks about why, according to Henri, is it useless to compare our lives with others? What challenges do you face when you accept life as unique? And here he's talking about poverty, wealth, success, and failure, beauty, ugliness aren't just facts of life. They are realities that are lived differently by different people. A poor person who has compared his poverty with the wealth of his neighbors and thought about the discrepancy lives his poverty very different than the person who has no wealthy neighbor to compare to. Reflection is essential for growth, development, and change. It is the unique power of the human person. You know, when I reflect back on my life, we were poor, but we didn't realize it because all our neighbors were poor. And
So my dad always said.
we all lived
Yeah,
on
me
the
too.
farm, but not until I left home. Well, and got into school, in town school, and kids wore these really nice clothes and went all these different places. Did I start to realize you know, but growing up, we didn't realize. So, so it, so he says we shouldn't compare ourselves, which is really hard to do. I think a lot of, you know, this is hard stuff. So, so as we hold our cup, now we're going to get into the cup of anybody else on this first chapter have anything else or that they,
So, I mean, interesting as you talk, I think about him and his grandmother. And so don't compare yourself. And yet she was helping him emulate others, right? So how do we teach our kids then to, you know, look up to people or to maybe model their life after others without the comparison? You know what I'm saying? That seems to be a fine line right there between.
I think junior high years are really tough with comparison, you know.
Well, on some level, we have to compare ourselves with other because we're human. I don't know how to be human unless I look at other people also.
So as he encourages like not to envy people, not to be envious of people or wish I was like them when I'm not, you know what I'm saying? But again, all of that's a process. In junior high, you don't even know what you are or what you're not yet. You know? So.
I mean, I guess for years, I always wished I were musical. I just admired people that could sit down and play and sing. I am not musical, and I've given it up. I never. But you know, it's that kind of thing. You kind of wish you were, or more outgoing, more whatever, you know, kind of thing. And we have to live our life, not someone else's, and we have to hold our own cup. So
Yeah, I thought that was kind of the striking thing he said there is that we must fully hold our cup.
our own cup. And all of our cups are filled, but all differently by sorrow and joy. So then we go on to his life at the Liark, daybreak, and of course he describes all the residents there. Have any of you ever worked or been around?
People with disabilities.
Yeah, people with disabilities.
My
Just
daughter-in-law and my granddaughter, 3 granddaughters have all worked at Mosaic. And they just take that for granted. I mean, and even when they're in high school and they're taking care of the needs of all these people, I mean, changing diapers on an adult man and everything, that's like, and it's just second nature, it's part of life.
It's good training.
They are, you know, and even the residents in Ann's group home, Ann's 42, and some are older and some are younger, but they're all like children. They all know who they can rely on. They can rely on the staff, as he says. He changed the diapers, he did this, and they relied on him and they trusted him. And but there was so much sorrow when he met all these kids and their families, and it is overwhelming when you hear of families and people in Ann's group home who no family visits, no, you know, whatever.
I still have families that don't come.
Yeah.
Oh.
You know, that nobody comes and to do things with them. And so, but, well, we'll go on about the sorrow. And it is tough when we have taken people, friends, into the group home. They're always tense.
Yeah.
That's first time.
Yeah.
And of course, we walk in and they say, "Hi, Joanne. Hi, Ken." And they don't hug because they're, you know, that's one of the things, but they come up to us and even one of the little girls that Anne was such a good friend of, she was blind and very disfigured, And she always say, hi, Joanne's mom or Ann's mom, you know, just they're just want to reach out to you. But mine is on the third page from the Cup of Sorrow. He said, surrounding them are men and women of different ages. He talks about the people who work with the residents there. And he said, but they soon discover that those they care for reveal to them their own less visible, but no less real sorrows. Sorrows about broken families, sexual unfulfillment, spiritual alienation, career doubts, and most of all, confusing relationships. And I think if I look in my cup, I see that. I can see broken families, you know, and disappointments in your life, and struggles your kids have gone through, and relationships that come and go, and all of that are struggles. And the more they look at their own wounded past and confront their uncertain futures, they see how much sorrow is in our own lives. And I think sometimes I don't want to dwell on that.
Right.
But he says you need to dwell on that and look in your cup in order to get the joy. So,
Isn't that kind of our privilege, though? I mean, because it seems to me like that's why those within the community that he was serving, that's why they would reveal to those working with them their own. We have the privilege of kind of denying or hiding the brokenness in our life, at least at some level, where I think they probably don't.
because you can see the brokenness.
Yeah,
I mean,
they're
Some-
totally dependent on
some
others.
don't read,
Yeah.
you know, but they all want love.
Yeah,
It's the big thing. They all want to be recognized for who they are. And
I think that's their gift to us, because it's like you said, I don't know if we would ever deal with our own stuff, because it is hard to, it's painful.
one of the things about Anne, you always know what she'll give you your expression, whether she likes it or not. She's not like us that say, oh, that's
Yeah.
nice. No, she doesn't have a false face, that's for
I
sure.
think that's true of them in general.
Yes.
That they are so authentic.
Yeah, they
And
are.
So that is why.
You know their feelings
That's probably why these people that came to help at daybreak,
are so,
you know, they were uneasy at first, and then they began to see the joys there, because they were so honest and so authentic, and they model what we should be. So we are being suspicious of somebody's motives, or, you know, get hurt by something, and they're open about it.
You had preached a sermon for us at a funeral for a man who was disabled. And what this was about, well, before COVID, so I'm gonna say 3 years ago. What struck me was that you started your sermon, you said, perhaps when we get to heaven, that will be normal, those with disability, and we will be the.
I don't remember that. It's an interesting thought.
I thought it was, I mean, obviously you're still remembering it.
Right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Well, and I think, wouldn't that be okay? I mean,
Yeah.
it's-
Yeah, we
Like-
can rejoice in that,
Yeah,
because
just
now,
like Joanne said, they're just always so willing to greet you and so open to your presence,
Mhm.
want to get to know you.
and it's, for them, it's the joy of belonging. And you know, how the different friendships that he had with all the different people, how they affected him. And then he talks about our cup. We have our own sorrows, but also our cup is the cup of human suffering. For each of us, our sorrows are deeply personal, but they're also universal. And I think about that now with Ukraine. My heart breaks at what's going on there, and the human suffering that's going on, and the families and the children, and we see it, I mean, all over our nation too, things that are happening, and in our community, and your heart just breaks. And so our sorrow is not just personal, but universal. And when we get to the cup of joy, I also think my heart breaks for the Ukrainians, but I am so joyful that the countries around are so accepting of all of those people and bringing food and everything they need, inviting them to their home. And it just brings joy to my heart that there are people that are doing that. And so,
And our presiding bishop has sent a letter to all of us to pray for peace.
for peace and
Signed by leaders of all kinds of denominations. Pretty powerful letter.
so he says, our cup is full of physical, mental, and spiritual anguish. It is the cup of starvation, torture, loneliness, rejection, abandonment, and immense anguish. Who wants to drink it?
It's a cup full of bitterness. No, I don't want it.
Yeah. So, and then he talks about, of course, he goes into Jesus suffering on the cross, and he, wanted to, my Father, if it's possible, let this cup pass by me. Jesus couldn't face it. Too much pain to hold, too much suffering to embrace, too much agony to live through. He didn't feel he could drink the cup filled to the brim with sorrows.
Interesting, isn't it, that we're doing a series called Full to the Brim.
So why did he say yes?
Yeah, why did he say this? Is that a question to us?
Yep. That's what he asked.
Mhm.
Why did he say yes? He says, I can't fully answer it, but.
I mean, he just had absolute trust and love for his
Yeah.
Father.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
so in the end, he
Not
was
my
gonna do it.
will, but your will be
Not your
done.
will. And Jesus didn't throw the cup away in despair. He kept it in his hands, willing to drink it to the dregs. This is not a show of willpower, staunch determination, or great heroism. It is a deep spiritual yes to Abba, the lover of his wounded heart. So what can Jesus' suffering teach us about facing our own sorrows?
You have to have a deep trust to start with. That's what I'm thinking. Jesus obviously would have had the trust all the time. But if I'm going to, when he says it's not willpower or determination, it's a spiritual yes to the Father. So then it's more of an acceptance of this is what God wants me to do.
Well, and I think we can learn from Jesus too that it doesn't always feel like God is paying any attention to us, right? I think Jesus knew God hadn't forsaken, but it was his experience that he had been forsaken. So I think I learned that. I think from Jesus that there are times when it feels as though we're forsaken, that God has forgotten us, that God isn't paying any attention, and yet
When we say, why God? Why?
So if I was a resident of Ukraine right now, that's what I would be
Sure,
saying.
yeah.
I'm like, this could be stopped. This could be prevented, God. Why?
And I also think, and this is on later on in the book too, but what are we, what are we called to do? How are we called to help? They are our neighbors.
Right.
well, there was a little thing in our bulletin that gave us just an inkling. about
Yeah.
Something that we can do
Yeah.
through Lutheran disaster response. Lutheran World Relief. I mean, that's the good thing about having the extensions of our congregations with these organizations that can do for others what we can't.
I read a story about a woman in Germany who was making quilts for the people coming into, and she asked people to send her a block, and she put them together. She hoped to get 50 blocks. Well, she got 500,
Wow.
all blue and yellow, and she
Wow.
was making them for the people coming into their country. I mean, it just warms my heart. So,
Well, back to your comments earlier, it's just, I mean, the praying for them is critical, I think.
But it just seems like we're missing something and not being more visible as a congregation within Forest City. And I don't know who we have for students at Waldorf. Do they know that we are praying? Kathy had in her prayers a week ago, praying for Ukraine. But do people really know that we care? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe there are Ukrainians. I know that there's a child in one of my grandchildren's class whose mother is from Ukraine. So I think we can do work with it.
I was wondering if there were people from, students from
That's what I
Ukraine.
mean.
But I know there is from Turkmenistan and all the way around there, all the way around Ukraine, so.
Because Turkmenistan was part of Russia
At one
too, I
time,
think.
yeah.
Yeah, there's quite a number of them from there.
In the last page of this, it talks about Jesus, and I thought this was his anguish and his prayer. And then he says, then an angel appeared to him, coming from heaven to give him strength. And I think about when we are going through things, I had never thought about it, but that an angel comes and gives us strength to get through that.
So I have a question. So talked through here how kind of you have to kind of get with your sorrows but for how long? I mean, at some point, don't you have to let some of that
coming
go?
to joy.
Okay. I'm like, I don't know, I've got a few of them that I just want to be done with. I'm just sick of it.
Joy
You know what I
comes in
mean?
the morning.
Lent is temporary.
Well, I'm just thinking about sorrows from sorrows from years past. How long do I have to dwell in
But
these sorrows?
again, think about that, Kathy. Think about that in terms of the world, in terms of worldwide. Again, we have the privilege to say, I'm done with sorrow. Like you said, when you were
But I mean,
growing
a
up, you
certain
didn't
one.
know that you were poor. You were still poor. That
Right,
had
but that
effects,
didn't affect-
Well, but it had effects.
Yeah, it
You
did.
know,
But like certain ones, I'm talking about like the sorrow 20 years from my divorce and some of that baggage that I
Yeah.
carry around. It's like,
Oh,
when
you
can
should-
I let that
You
go?
should let that go.
Oh, I would love
She
to.
would
I
love
just,
to, yeah.
I don't know.
You should
It's
learn that.
different.
Chapters on
Okay.
joy.
Okay, good.
Let it go.
And okay, at the end of this, on the end of the chapter, in the midst of the sorrows is consolation. In the midst of the darkness is light. In the midst of despair is hope. In the midst of Babylon is a glimpse of Jerusalem. And in the midst of the army of demons is the consoling angel. The cup of sorrow, inconceivable as it seems, is also the cup of joy. Only when we discover this in our own life can we consider drinking it.
So it's over, Kathy, so it's joy.
Well, there you go. And there was joy that came out of that.
There you go. Well,
But that's hard to understand what he just said, I think.
The cup of sorrow.
Now what?
What's
Wait,
puzzling
you have to drink the cup of sorrow, but it's also the cup of joy. You have to have sorrow in order to have joy, but he's saying you have to.
Don't you think in some ways he's saying to fully taste what comes to you from the cup of joy, you have to also drink the cup of sorrow.
And
Fully
you need
taste
contrast, don't you?
Yeah.
We have to have contrast in our
it's
lives.
like if you don't have a storm, you don't appreciate the sunshine.
Yeah, that's kind of it.
Kind of, you know.
Yeah.
You don't know the difference.
In our experience, when Anne was born, it was devastating.
Yeah.
And it was really hard. And then as the years went on, she has given us so much joy. And I said, I finally got where I could understand we could be saint and sinners at the same time. Because she has given us immense joy. There is still sorrow. Because, I mean, she's losing some of her physical stuff. And there's still sorrow, but in the midst of it, and I think about how many people she has blessed,
Right.
and also the other residents in the group home. How I just feel better when I go in because they're so happy. But and so I think that's what he's trying to say is, in the midst of sorrow and tragedy, have you seen the joy? Just today, I looked up, this baby Ruby Sue we've been praying for. She's now 11 months old, and her mom pasted on Facebook. She's in this little yellow outfit and a bow, and she's had, I don't know how many surgeries and whatever. And she said, "Oh, Ruby Sue, you've given us such joy."
And you just know there's deep sorrow there.
There's
There is.
very deep sorrow there, but it's the, so,
Good example.
so you have examples of experiencing joy in sorrow, or joy that comes out of that, or?
Would it be fair to say that one can get stuck in sorrow and then you won't get to the joy? You can't get out of it for some reason.
I don't know if you'll address that in the book at all, but
Yeah, I haven't read the book.
right. We can get stuck pretty much anywhere, can't we?
Mhm.
It's human being.
Well, and I think in this chapter too, he also says, when we are crushed like grapes, we cannot think of the wine we will become.
Yeah. Well, what's the scripture that when we go through a fire, it burns out the dross? Is that what it burns? So we come out as pure gold would be the scripture, which I don't know where it's at, but I used to cling to that, knowing that tough times in my life then helps me to take away those things that are not of God.
Let's see here.
And he realizes it's a stretch because he says the cup of sorrow, it's inconceivable that it is also the cup of joy. It really doesn't seem possible.
Doesn't seem.
But I know what funeral that you were talking about that Ron preached at, and I remember, part of the sermon was you talked about this person's dad, who we know, had said what a joyful person that he was, through most of his life, and how much joy he gave other people, and just what a lovely person he was.
I sometimes think people who have gone through either terrible illnesses or accidents and work their way back, you know, give other people such encouragement and they're joyful. I mean, they're so thankful for what they've gone through and are on the other side to see the joy.
I don't know if you all remember, I became aware of a man who had a son who was had many physical disabilities, and this man started running marathons after his son was born, and he would push his son in that cart. And I think he did Ironman, where he pulled his son in a cart behind his bike and carried him on his back as he swam. It was just such an inspirational story. Wow. I think he's now deceased, so I don't know what happened to his son.
He goes on to say, calling myself a priest today radically changes me to let go of every distance, every pedestal, every ivory tower, and just connect my own vulnerability with the vulnerability of those I live with. And what a joy that is. The joy of belonging, the joy of being a part of being different.
Are we in the joy chapter now?
Yeah, we're in the joy chapter. Yeah. And he says, he says, somehow at daybreak has given me eyes to discover joy where many others only see sorrows. Talking with a homeless man on a Toronto street doesn't feel frightening. Soon money is not the main issue. It becomes, where are you from? Who are your friends? What's happening in your life? Eyes meet, hands touch. And there is, yes, often completely unexpected, a smile, a burst of laughter, and a true moment of joy. The sorrow is still there, but something has changed. By my no longer standing in front of others, but sitting with them and sharing a moment of togetherness. I think, in my experience, generally when I go visit someone, I come away much happier than when I went. Even though sometimes it's hard to go if someone has terminal cancer or is, has had a death or whatever. But often I come away much happier than when I went in to do that. And I think, to me, that's what he was saying. When you're not standing in front of others, but sitting with them and sharing a moment of togetherness.
And that is your gift, Joanne. If I was put in that situation, yeah, I would not come away with joy. I would come away frustrated that I wasn't helpful to them. But it's so your gift. I just love that.
Well, our cups are all filled with different things.
Mine is hospitality, so
Yeah, I know.
so I don't have to visit anybody.
But,
You just have to have them
What
over.
did you say?
Yeah.
but Carolyn, after you have entertained,
Uh-huh.
aren't you just really happy
Yes,
for
yes.
the conversation
Yes,
and
yes.
all of that?
Yes.
Yes.
Mhm. So I have to invite sick people to my house. and
You don't
it's
have to
okay.
be sick, Carolyn. But isn't it joyful at any interaction with people,
Well,
right?
yes, I agree with that, yes.
It's the same thing.
But it'd probably be better if they were sitting.
But see, then I'm envying your gift, and I know it
No,
is so
yeah.
your gift, yeah.
Tuesday nights, Carolyn and Dana, Yost and I, we get together, Zoom for 60 to 90 minutes. And Brad has joined us a couple of times, and Jim Cherry has, and last week afterwards, I just texted Ray and I said, thank you for sharing Dana with Carolyn and me every week for 90 minutes. I said, that time is really dear to me and I know it is to Carolyn. And she said, no problem. She said, I know it means a lot to him too. And it's a simple thing, but afterwards, I'm always so thankful that we do that. It just really lifts me up and we get to talk about whatever we want. And
Are you still doing that?
yeah, Jackie Fruworth started it with us on Sunday morning. She set up a Zoom when we were not going to church.
When you were peer ministers, maybe?
Nope, during the start of the pandemic.
But we were assisting ministers, that was the connection.
Yeah,
That was the connection. It was at the beginning of the pandemic when nobody was going to church. And we started then, and then there started to be like virtual church. And so then we moved it to Tuesday nights somewhere along the line in there. And Jackie always kind of came and went, but the three of us were pretty steady. And now every Tuesday night at 7, and once in a while somebody has to miss, but it's always amazing. I was telling them last time, I said, sometimes we can't talk to everybody about everything, but I said, with those two, I trust them and I can talk to them about whatever I want.
That's good.
Because I was telling them, I said, I have a friend that I don't talk about politics with because we're so polar opposite. But with those two, we can talk about anything, that is on our mind. And it's just, it brings me great joy to, afterwards, I think how blessed I am to have that connection.
Would you like to read the next part too? Because that's what goes from here. Now we're holding the cup and we see our sorrows, and out of the sorrows we see our joy. And in lifting the cup, he says, we lift them up, our sorrows and joys for others to see. When we share our joys and sorrows with other people, and they then become less. That's what the lifting of the cup is.
Sharing.
Is the sharing, is letting. So we probably have gone over our time. Any other things you want to bring out about?
Yeah, I mean, I'd just say for anyone who wants to read the book, maybe hasn't read the book, I would just say there's a lot of Bible passages in here too that are
Right.
really great references. And so it can become a Bible study, I think. And, for anyone who wants to go down that road.
Yeah, there's, all of just a lot of Bible verses in here too.
I do like the quote here, suffering of the world. Where is the joy in that? That he says, it's there for anyone brave enough to enter it.
So
Sometimes we just stumble into it, but sometimes we can.
So if the experience of sorrow is often a prerequisite to finding joy, does this mean that we shouldn't try to alleviate people's suffering?
No.
How do you think we should relate to those who suffer?
Suffering it's a circumstance of life. It's going to be there. And so we can't erase it or not do it, but we have the opportunity to alleviate and bring joy. And so sometimes that's, I think, where suffering has to lead to some solace and some joy and some, we have all the opportunity in the world because suffering isn't going to go away. Sorrow and suffering it isn't. We live in a broken world. So
Part of life.
there's no way we can say, well, we only are going to have joy. Well, that's just not life. It's just not.
All you have to do is believe and your life will be joyful, right?
Right. There are theologies that
Say that.
Yes. I don't buy it, but
No, but,
yeah, I mean, I think we still are called to fight, the things that cause sorrow, because they're really part of the death dealing system in some ways, right?
so the ending of this chapter on the last page, we need to remind each other the cup of sorrow is also the cup of joy. That precisely what causes us sadness can become the fertile ground for gladness. Indeed, we need to be angels for each other, to give each other strength and consolation, because only when we fully realize that the cup of life is not only a cup of sorrow, but a cup of joy, we will be able to drink it. So it's kind of what you were saying, you know, we need to be, we need to be angels to each other and give them strength and consolation. And I think in the next chapter, then he really talks about this, but he also says, we just don't go and blab our sorrows to everybody who will listen, you know, kind of things.
And again, you know, Jesus wants us to be the ones to bring that joy. I get so frustrated, you know, I rewrite a lot of the prayers on Sundays that are given to me because the prayers are said, Jesus, heal the earth, feed the hungry, clothe the naked. Now we have to do that. He wants us to do that. And so I'm usually changing it to help us to do that. You know, because we can pray to Jesus to do everything and then we can just sit back and say, well, go ahead now. You know, we just have to remember that we're the hands and we have to do that.
Oh, a couple things before we go. You remember the part in the chapter where he talked about the Indian statue?
Mm-hmm.
And how I made a copy of it, and how we have to live our own life, and his strength and his looking upward. And Henri was such a visual person that he would see things and it would, you know, it would tell him things. And then when we talked about Jesus' resurrection, the cross of when we talked about this, about how gold it is, and Jesus' hands are not nailed to the cross, and up here are his disciples and all of the different people, and what joy there was in the resurrection. I mean, in his death. And this was a cross that he had seen. I have to. That is really something. Where that was in the book when he described that as one of those moments when he saw that, and the gold around it and all of this symbolism, and said even then there is joy for us.
Well, and Henri talks about a little bit about his depression. Maybe he gets into that later, but on the second to last page, he said, joys are hidden in sorrows. I know this from my own times of depression. And I don't know if one of his books deals more with his depression than the others. I'm not sure.
I think he went through a period of depression. I was trying to figure out when he wrote these certain books. And he went through a depression after his mom died, and he stayed at the monastery for a short time. Remember you said last time, and that he was terribly depressed, and so that's when he went there to the first time.
Oh, the first time.
To the monastery.
To the monastery, the first time. The second time, then he went
And 79.
for 7 months. You know, I just, this is a librarian in me, I guess. You know, he first was at Notre Dame, and then he was at Yale for 10 years. And then he went to the monastery for a little bit after his mother died. And then he went to South America to work with the poor. I think that just, you know, and for 6 months, and then he came back and he was at Harvard. And after that, he went to the Daybreak community.
And his
And
time
he
in
was there
South
10 years and shortly died after that.
His time in South America was very distressing. to him because of all the sorrows that he would
the
see.
poverty and all of that, so. And when he went, when he wrote the diaries, was before he had gone to South America. Anyway, that's all I have.
Yeah, I mean, I like, maybe you already quoted this, but we easily lose sight of the joys and speak of our sorrows as the only reality there is. That's where I think you get what you said. Can you get caught in your sorrows, or can you get caught in that?
Yeah, so everything's negative,
Yeah.
because sometimes we don't think it's kosher to talk about our joys.
Sure, right. Yeah. And I like what he said about Jesus' yes too, that his yes was, let's see, his yes took away the fatality of the inner, I can't read my own writing, of his ministry. Instead of an irrevocable or final end, if Jesus' death became the beginning of a new life, his yes enabled him to trust fully in the harvest the dying grain would yield. Good stuff. Thanks, Joanne.
Oh, you're welcome.
We'll meet again
Yes.
in 2 weeks.
But then you often hear of people who, everything's fine, I'm always
Mhm.
happy, no,
They're in
and
denial.
so, I think it has to be a mixture of,
Yeah.
reality.
But I tend to walk away if somebody's gonna recite their, if they're gonna continue to complain about something, and I've already heard it once, I have very short patience of listening again. So yeah, I need a mix. I want to hear some other joys also.
There are those Christmas letters that it's all woe is us and this, and oh my gosh. And then you get the other one from somebody else about all of their lovely accomplishments. And you say, hey,
Put them together.
yep,
you'll
put it
get
together and
balance.
see how this goes. So, yes, do you want this?
But
It looks so familiar, but you haven't answered something.
Are you gonna wrap up in any particular way, or are we done?
well, that's all that I
Okay,
have,
all right.
2
2 weeks from tonight then?
2 weeks from tonight here.